Stop me if this sounds familiar. You start your day with an agenda, a plan on exactly what you want to and need to get done for the day. Then the phone rings, your email dings, and a coworker walks up asking for help with a project or requesting your presence at a meeting. Sounds like your typical day, right? Don't worry, you're not alone. Performing at your best each and every day when you have a to-do list longer than your arm and a constant barrage of needs and wants from other people is a daunting thing. So why do we let all this interrupt us, derail us from our goals? Well, author and self-discipline strategist Rory Vaden has some answers for you. In his new book, Procrastinate on Purpose, Rory presents a different approach for how to identify and focus on what's important so we can perform our best each and every day. Rory, welcome back to Success. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Darren. It's good to be back, my friend.
So, Rory, let's dive into the concepts in your new book. And frankly, Rory, there are a million books out there on time management and performing better. But you claim there's one unique and distinctive difference about your book, and more importantly, your ideas that guarantee it's unlike anything we've ever heard before. So share what that distinction is.
Well, here's how it happened. I was with my business partner, Dustin, and it was a Saturday morning. I go over to get him, and as we're walking out the door, he has this 2-year-old baby girl named Haven. She's like 2.5 years old, and she's the sweetest, has cute curly brown hair and these big brown eyes and a little southern kind of accent developing in a baby kind of form. And I go over to get Dustin, and we're walking out, and Haven comes running down the hall, and she's like, Daddy, where are you going? And he's like, oh, Haven, I got to go to work today. It's a big meeting, but I'll be back later. And her little eyes start to well up with tears. And she's like, no, Daddy, no work. No, please, no work, Daddy, please. And in that moment, Darren, I had 2 realizations. The first was that I'm not ready to have kids just yet. And the second one was this, that time management is no longer just logical. Time management is emotional. And yet everything you read about time management is all about tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists, the latest app, the coolest gadget. And yet feelings of guilt and anxiety and pressure and fear and the desire to feel important and the need to feel valued and our want to impress people has as much to do with how we choose to spend our time as our calendar does, and yet nobody ever talks about that. And so there is this whole entire human element that has basically been ignored as it relates to how we choose to spend our time.
So before we get into some of the to-dos, Rory, let's talk about some of the not to-dos. These things that, say, prevent us day to day from performing at our best. I'm sure there are a lot of them are obvious, but sometimes we need them pointed out directly in order for us to get that ball rolling in the right direction and getting out of our own way. So what would you say are some of the things that prevent us from performing at our best?
I think a lot of it has to do with our thinking. Successful people think differently. I'm going to give you an example. One of the things that's one of the most touted strategies of time management is the to-do list. The to-do list is something people kind of live and die by, right? Like, I have to have my to-do list. Well, to-do lists seem to be one of those things that is slightly discounted by multipliers because a to-do list is formed by asking ourselves the question, what are the most important things I need to do today? But that flies in the face of exactly how multipliers think. They think totally differently. They say, how can I use my time today to create more time tomorrow? What can I do today that scales my efforts and my results and exponentially multiplies my impact tomorrow? So it's an example of how we have to learn how to think the way the most successful people in the world think so that we can start to do the things that they do, and then we can ultimately have the things that they have. And part of that is just getting rid of some of the old tired techniques and strategies that are a little bit antiquated, to be honest.
So speaking of antiquated strategies, you talk about managing and prioritizing your time as an antiquated and limiting strategy. So break this down for us. Why are these strategies no good to us?
Well, if you look at time management as just a body of work, Generation 1 time management, as we're calling it, was really about efficiency. And it came in, maybe the 50s and 60s on the heels of manufacturing. And it was all about, it was this one-dimensional strategy of, can I do things faster? And all things being equal, there's nothing wrong with efficiency. Efficiency is great, but efficiency reaches a point of diminishing returns. You can only do things so fast, and that is evidenced by the fact that we all carry around miniature computers in our pockets, and yet we're still behind. We still have a million emails, and we still never feel caught up. Well, in 1989, a book came out really that changed the world, right? The late Dr. Covey wrote the brilliant book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he introduced a system basically for scoring our activities so that we could prioritize them. And so we went from just trying to manage our time by doing things efficiently to kind of evaluating our various tasks and then prioritizing them. And prioritizing is still a very relevant skill. I mean, it's still something that we all need today. But since that time, prioritizing has been thrown around as the end-all, be-all strategy for time management. It's like if someone's busy, we just look at them and go, well, you just got to get your priorities in line. And what we finally started to realize is there's nothing about prioritizing that creates more time. All prioritizing does is simply take item number 7 on your to-do list and bump it up to number 1, but it doesn't give you a strategy for dealing with the other 9 items, let's say, and it doesn't actually create more time. Prioritizing is kind of like borrowing time, and instead of spending that time on task 2, 3, and 4, you're going to do it on item number 7. So it's still a valuable skill. You have to learn to push one thing in front of another, but there's nothing about prioritizing or efficiency necessarily that creates more time, and that's what multipliers do.
All right. So speaking of multipliers, let's start talking about the modeling the right way to do it. So you identify people who perform at their best, achievers that we feature in Success, for example, as quote unquote multipliers. So explain why you identify them as such and what it has to do with their success.
So a multiplier is a person who seems to create an extraordinary amount of results for a limited amount of time maybe that they put into things. They're people, they're like Richard Branson is one that comes to mind, right? You go, is he just that much smarter? Or how is it that somebody can create such a huge impact with the same amount of time every day as the rest of us? And what it really comes down to, again, that multipliers think differently. And this is kind of how you multiply time, all right? You multiply time by spending time on things today that give us more time tomorrow. You give yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that give you more time tomorrow. So you're not just making the urgent calculation. You're not just saying, how soon does this matter? You're also making the significance calculation, which is how long does this matter? And what will the impact be over time? And that is what multipliers do. They think longer term. They are perpetually thinking out in the future, where most of us are not making the significance calculation. Most of us are only making the urgent calculation, only dealing with the interruptions, the text messages, the emails, the urgent phone calls, the pulled into meetings. And some of that is unavoidable. You have to deal with some of that. But multipliers really do think differently. They're thinking longer term.
So make this tangible, Rory, this significance calculation. Give us an example. Okay, if I spend time on X today, then tomorrow I'll multiply my time by Y. Give us something as a specific example.
Okay. So, if I asked you, Darren, I said, hey, do you have 2 hours just open in your calendar today that are free that you could use to do just whatever you wanted?
No,
definitely not. Right. So if you ask the average person, do you have 2 hours to set up online bill pay? Do you just have that time open? We'd say, well, gosh, no, I don't have that much time. Well, what a multiplier kind of realizes, though, is that if you give yourself the permission to set up online bill pay, and that saves you 30 minutes every month from paying those bills. Well, after 4 months, you're going to break even on that time that is invested. And that is a concept that we introduce in the book, ROTI, return on time invested. Well, every month thereafter, the 4th month, you are now making money. And it's kind of how money makes itself into more money with compounding interest. When you automate things, that is time making itself into more time. And every month thereafter, you're getting a return on that time invested. But if you don't make the significance calculation, if you don't think about how your time spent today changes things in the future, then inside of the urgent calculation, inside of only thinking of the paradigm of one day, or looking at my to-do list for today, it never makes sense to spend 2 hours to set up online bill pay. But when you make the significance calculation, it's so obvious that that is what you should do, because over time you get all that time back plus a bunch more.
Oh, makes sense. Okay. So the subtitle of your book is 5 Permissions to Multiply Your Time. So let's go through a few of these now so that we can get started towards being more like the successful multipliers that you studied and talked with in writing your book. Start with the first one, eliminate. Definitely something we all struggle with, but what's a more productive way to eliminate?
Yeah, eliminate is, I think, where we by far have the largest, swath of room for improvement in our calendars. And it's saying no to the things that we just shouldn't even be doing, right? And if you multiply your time by how you spend your time today to create more time tomorrow, then saying no to something today creates more time for you tomorrow, because it's time that you would have been doing something that you normally would have said yes to. How you go about doing that, one, is just making the significance calculation and really questioning and challenging, what are the things that I can be doing that create more time and more scalable exponential results tomorrow? But the second part of it is realizing that it's impossible to go through life without saying no. In other words, for me, Darren, I'm a people pleaser. I want to make everybody happy, and so I say yes to things that I know don't really multiply my time. I know they're not things that only I can do, but I kind of feel guilty, and rather than saying no and having that confrontation or that conflict or that uncomfortable moment, I end up saying yes. And what took me forever to realize, and this came out in one of the multiplier profiles in one of the interviews, is it became clear to me when they said, Rory, you are always saying no to something. Anytime you say yes to one thing, you are simultaneously saying no to an infinite number of other things. And when inside of that realization, it becomes obvious that it's futile to go through life without trying to say no. I'm going to have to say no to something. So I finally gained the courage, or the permission to ignore, the permission to say no, the permission to eliminate.
Now, you mentioned one of the tricks of automation in a previous example, but the automation chapter of your book is a great one. So would you mind sharing the lesson that you learned from the coffee shop?
Yeah, this one is my favorite, and I was hoping you would ask me about it because it's you. I was sitting with you at a coffee shop in Southern California, and I grew up in a trailer park, and raised by a single mom most of my early life until about I was 9 or 10 years old, and I was sitting there with you, and one of the questions I asked you, and I don't even know if you remember this, it may not be a salient point in your life, Darren, but it was for me, as I said, Darren, what do you think is the difference between wealthy people, have a lot of money, and everybody else? And you kind of told me this example of this Starbucks. I remember you saying something to the effect of, there's 3 different type of people in the world as it relates to money. The first person walks into Starbucks and they say, do I want the $5 coffee? And if they do, let's say they're completely governed by impulses, and they'll do whatever it takes to get the coffee. They'll put on a credit card, whatever. Well, that's not most people. But the way that a wealthy person thinks is they realize that if they spend $5 on that coffee, then that's $5 they're not spending on something else. That's $5 they're not investing into their, portfolio, or into the real estate, or into their own personal development, which is something that wealthy people often take very seriously, is coaching and books and personal development. And I said, well, yeah, that's opportunity cost, which is exactly right. But $5 invested at, 10% for 30 years is like $50. So the way that you explained it to me was, you said, the wealthy person asks themselves, do I want this $5 coffee? And if the answer is yes, their second question is this $5 coffee worth $50 to me 30 years from now? And I remember thinking, what? I mean, that's crazy. I had never heard that. But that is the significance calculation. That is thinking long term. That is getting outside of the paradigm and the construct of only evaluating based on what I have available today. And that is how multipliers think. It's very, very different. So how does that apply to automation? Well, this is what I finally realized. Automation is to your time exactly what compounding interest is to your money. Anything you create a process for today saves you time tomorrow. Just like compounding interest works for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you create great systems, the same thing happens. Now the system is taking over instead of you. And so it's working all the time, constantly. And you start getting a return on that time invested. So automation is to your time exactly what compounding interest is to your money.
Yeah, and all of a sudden I want to go get a coffee. Yes, that's great. All right, so I want to skip to the fourth permission, procrastinate. The permission of incomplete, which is obviously quite contrary to everything we've been told and lectured about. So walk us through this concept of procrastinating on purpose in order to be sure that we're performing at our very best.
Absolutely. You know, here's how it is you have to learn how to say no to the things that don't matter so you can say yes to the things that do. Procrastinate on purpose is about the permission of the incomplete. It's about becoming okay with letting your inbox fill up so that you can focus on the thing that you need to do, on the project that needs to be completed. Procrastinating on purpose is saying, I'm going to ignore this incoming phone call because this is the only chance I have to spend this time here with Darren, right? It is saying I'm going to intentionally put off cleaning my desk because this is the only time of day when I can get a hold of decision makers and I got to make that sales call. Procrastinating on purpose is intentionally delaying things that can wait so that you can really focus in on the things that can't wait. It's just kind of flipping that strategy and using it to your advantage. And it's realizing that there are things that can wait. Your email can wait. And I'm not saying you have to not answer it ever or not for a week, but you cannot look at it for 4 hours so that you can focus on getting things done. But so many of us are afraid of that. We're afraid that we have to be available 24/7 to respond in a split-second notice at every person's beck and call. And it's destroying our peace. It's creating stress. It is overwhelming us and it is burning us out. And we have to be okay with putting things off intentionally, at least for a short time, so that we can focus fully and engage and concentrate and launch into that harvest season to get things done and let the other stuff sit incomplete for a little while.
So before we start wrapping up, Rory, I just want to be sure that we're really clear about the distinctions that we're making here on procrastination. Because, you know, your first book, Take the Stairs, was all about psychology of overcoming procrastination and improving self-discipline and taking action. And now you have a book that basically encourages us to procrastinate, albeit in a practiced manner. So talk about the contradiction, but more importantly, the distinction between the two, that they are really driving at the same result, but the semantics of it might be in contradiction.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up because there's a big difference, Darren, in waiting to do something when we know we should be doing it, but we don't feel like doing it, and waiting because we're deciding that now is not the right time. Waiting to do something when you know you should be doing it, but you don't feel like doing it, that's procrastination. That's the most expensive invisible cost in business today. That is the thing that Jim Rohn said will be the killer of all success. Classic procrastination is consciously delaying what you know you should be doing. However, waiting because you're deciding that now is not the right time. It's not the right time to check that email. It's not the right time to accept that incoming phone call. It's not the right time to reorganize. It's not the right time. That's not procrastination. That is a synonym for procrastinate on purpose, which is something the world really needs more of, which is patience. So inaction that results from indulgence, that's procrastination. That's not going to the gym when you know you should be doing it, not making that sales call when it needs to be done, putting off the thing that needs to happen now because you're scared or you're busy or you just don't feel like it. That's procrastination. But inaction that results from intention, that is patience. And that is a critical part of being able to multiply your time, because you're going to put it off now so that you can focus on the things that need to be done, the things that are significant, the things that only you can do, the things that if you do them today will create more time for you tomorrow.
So then, our last question to round out our spent time together here today. As people turn off this audio and they wander off into their worlds filled with to-do lists and calls and appointments, give us a final send-off message that we need to remember if our goal is to become a multiplier and to perform at our very best. What's that one thing we need to put on a sticky or make it a mantra or repeat to ourselves every morning, that one thing that's going to keep us on track with being and becoming a multiplier?
Well, I did not realize until I was writing the later part of the Procrastinate on Purpose book that it's not actually the sequel to Take the Stairs. It's the prequel. Because Take the Stairs is all about how to do the things you know you should be doing even when you don't feel like doing them. Procrastinate on Purpose is about what to do with everything else so that you can get down to those things that only you can do. The message, the intersection point is the same. Ultimately, success comes down to doing the things you know you should be doing. And you have to do that